So this morning, sticking with a consistent theme, I'm still thinking about Quentin Tarantino and Django Unchained. And one of the big themes for the pushback that he received about his movie is a pretty common theme for him, which was the violence. There was criticism of the movie's violence, and he kind of dismisses it, saying that, well, the violence is cathartic. It's this way of dealing with this problem, seeing people who deserve violence acted against them receive that violence. And I don't know that I'm offended by violence in movies, or I'm not offended by violence in movies. I really can't say that I am. I'd be a hypocrite if I did. But anyways, the thing is that there's something important that's worth addressing and worth talking about more, fleshing out more, when it comes to the violence in Django Unchained and what it's being used to do. Step out into the street here, walk around these sprinklers. So Tarantino, I don't know starting where. Maybe starting with an Inglourious Bastards, and maybe accepting the Hateful Eight. So Inglourious Bastards, Django Unchained, and then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood are kind of united by this theme of cathartic violence, and people who seeing people who history has prevented us from seeing that violence enacted on them, seeing them through Tarantino's films and setting the world aright, providing a form of justice through these fantastical imaginings of violence. So in Inglourious Bastards, you see Hitler and the Nazis killed brutally, and you're able to, enjoy seeing them killed brutally. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's the Manson family who, in Tarantino's reimagined history, go into a different house and encounter this guy who's so tough that he can kick Bruce Lee's butt. And then this guy enacts violence on them, imagined violence for their historical action, And Django Unchained does something similar. It's a little different, though, than the other two in the way it portrays that violence. There's very little violence against slaves in Django Unchained. Slavery is more of a convenient backdrop to the story. But what violence we do see against the slaves is portrayed somberly. It's meant to move us, shock us, repel us. But the violence against white slavers is portrayed comedically. And that's, I think, very important. By portraying the violence against these slavers as funny, it invites us to take pleasure in it in a way that's different from the violence in Inglourious Bastards, the violence in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Different kind of pleasure, Anyways, so what these three films do, though, is they promote this idea that justice is only possible through violence, by witnessing violence enacted on the bodies of others, that's how we can achieve satisfaction, right? So, essentially, these films could function as an alternate history, as a mythic reimagining of history. But for myth to be absorbed by a community, by a culture, it has to provide satisfactory explanations for the universe it portrays, for the experience of the people watching it. So if you're watching Inglourious Basterds, you're watching Django Unchained, you're watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and these mythic reimaginings of history, if they are to replace your own understanding of history, they have to provide you with satisfaction. They have to make you feel good about their ability to negotiate with and explain the universe. And so the problem is that historically, these can never do that. Django Unchained can never satisfactorily explain and deal with slavery from a historical perspective. And it demonstrates this by jettisoning that historical perspective, by lampooning it, by taking enslaved forms of resistance and turning them into foolish, feminine, deceitful, and portraying that, contrasting that with this ultra-masculine white hero played by a black man. The only way that is satisfactory is by being able to continue to dismiss the historical perspective. And the only way that it can do that is through the violence that it provides. So, by making you feel good enough about violence carried out against these white slavers, so good that you will laugh at it, find enjoyment in it. Not like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or Inglourious Basterds, where the violence against the Nazis or the violence against the Manson family is still brutal and somber in a way, and shocking. As I say that, I'm thinking about when I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with my kids, and we get to the end and they start, beating the Manson family to death, and my kids all erupted into, fits of laughter. So maybe I'm off base. But so for me anyways, there's something different about the violence and the way that's portrayed. It's still extreme and in some sense revolting or harrowing. At least it makes you whoa, and maybe that's why they erupted in laughter, is because it was such a shock to the system. But the violence against white slavers in Django Unchained is portrayed very comedically, almost like vaudeville-ish, like watching Bugs Bunny or the Marx Brothers, and so to me that's the thing that needs to be talked about the violence in this movie, how it tries to function as this satisfactory explanation for the world, so satisfactory that it will enable you to dismiss other problems, like the problem of enslaved resistance and the different forms of resistance and how they worked, and so anyways, just if the conversation about violence in Tarantino movies, and especially Django Unchained, is picked up again, I think that's where it needs to focus, is on how the violence functions to allow you to dismiss the historical problems and accept this violence as a satisfactory way of dealing with and experiencing the world.